Welcome to How to Sell More. Today, we're talking about how to handle those really tough questions. You know, the objections that get thrown your way during the sales process. I'm Mark Drager. Let's get into it. There is not a single one of us who's responsible for selling a vision, selling an idea, a product, a service. No matter what, if we are on one side of the table and we are trying to work with someone or convince someone on the other side of the table to move forward with something, at a certain point, you are going to face those objections. And some of them, in my opinion, are really easy to be able to get around. I actually sometimes scratch my head wondering why people struggle so much just going ahead and turning the objection into a benefit. And we're going to get into that today. But then there are others that just seem like total roadblocks, total deal breakers. Like, how do you respond to them? How do you take control back? How do you move on to the next steps? How do you ensure that there's a clear path forward without feeling like you're moving into a passive role? And there's some tips, there's some tricks, and most of all, there's some ways we can approach our conversations to be able to handle those tough questions, not be afraid of the objection, and know that no matter what they throw at you, there's a way that you can keep driving the conversation and the process forward. So first of all, I think it'd be really helpful for us to understand that there are common types of objections, and you've probably faced all of these. And so the most obvious one is the objection to price, right? Like, the price doesn't fit, it's too high, it's just not what they expected, they're not sure if they can budget it. There's always an issue of price. There are objections specifically to the product maybe, or the service you're selling. And maybe there's an issue with they're not quite sure if it's a fit. Maybe they're not quite sure if your company, your product, your service is the right one to move forward with. There are all kinds of objections always related to the product or the service itself. There can be objections related to trust. You know, do you have the credibility? Do you have the trust? Do you have the ability to deliver on all the promises that you're making? Then there are what's called stall objections. You know, I need to think about it. Maybe next quarter. I'm not sure. I didn't budget for this. All of these types of objections that really just come down to they are not ready to move forward right now. And lastly, there are these objections related to authority. You know, I need to talk to my boss. I'm not in a position to sign off on this. I need to go ahead and get other stakeholders involved. I need to go out and get financing. I need to go out and do something else. Someone else is ultimately responsible for this, so don't blame me. I'm just the person who's collecting information. And so at the end of the day, no matter really which objection you get hit with, it's going to fall into one of these 5 categories: price, your product or service, if you've built up enough trust, if someone is trying to stall, or if they're trying to push off the decision-making to some other authority or some other power. Now, as I mentioned off the top, some of these objections are super, super easy because through pattern recognition, we can start to notice exactly the same types of objections coming up from the same types of people in the same types of ways. And as we work with people, and especially this is powerful if you niche down, if you can get the same types of conversations from the same types of people in really tight succession, you can start to test different ways to handle those objections, and you just become more confident over time. But before we get into like real strategies and tips on how to do this, I just want to share a quick story with you, because I think most of this actually has to do with our mindset and our approach. I am not afraid of people throwing objections my way, no matter what the objections are, and it's for a few reasons. First of all, if I don't know, I am totally fine telling people I just don't know. I just don't know. Now, why don't I know? I've never been asked that question before. That's never been a concern for anyone I've worked with. You know, we've worked with, and I can go into my numbers, but it's like, well, we've done thousands of projects with over 300 customers in 29 different industries. We've been in business for 15 years, and no one has ever asked that before. Right now, I'm not diminishing their objection or their challenge, but I'm just saying this is a strange question. This is an outlier. This is not something that's ever come up. Great question. Let me take it away and come back to you. So first of all, I am not afraid to tell people that I just don't know, especially if it's something that has never been asked before. What a unique question. What a unique situation. Let me go away and figure that out for you. So I'm not afraid of that. Second, I have come to realize in life, in business, and especially in sales, there's an opportunity in every challenge. And I've also learned that along the same lines, that every weakness is a strength and every strength is a weakness in the right context or the right situation. And so I can remember back when I started my company back in 2006, I sublet this little tiny office off of a colleague, off of a friend, Max Callis. So I sublet this office off of Max and his brother Lionel. They're running an internet marketing company. I just had one room within their bigger office, and they were much larger than me. They were already over 7 figures. They already had a team. And I remember one afternoon, gosh, maybe 2007, 2008. I remember one afternoon, Max came back from a meeting, and it was a sales meeting. It was a first meeting, and he was talking to the team, and I happened to overhear it. And now if, listen, you listen to the podcast, I like to inject myself in conversations. It's gotten me in trouble sometimes, but I also like to talk, and I like to help people. So I'm listening to Max, and he said, I just met with this perfect prospect, and we're showing him the portfolio. We're showing him the work. And again, this is 2007 or 8, and this is a web development company. And he goes, and the prospect says, all your websites look the same. And I didn't know what to say to that. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't even think, but I just naturally responded because it just seemed so obvious to me. Of course they all look the same. Of course our websites all look the same. We have produced hundreds of websites. We have done all of the work, and we have arrived at the secret formula for how a website should be laid out to be able to convert the best and be the most effective and win you the most business or the most leads or whatever your goal was, right? Like, just drop in goal here. But it just totally makes sense to me that if someone's like, oh, your stuff looks the same. Well, of course it does, because this is the most effective way to do it. Would you rather me create something totally unique and totally different just for the sake of it, but have it be less effective? So I said that, I blurted that out because it just made sense to me. And Max took a step back and was like, huh. And in that moment, because again, I was young, it was many years ago. I was maybe 24, 25 at the time. I didn't realize that this natural skill that I had to be able to take someone's objection and just turn that negative into a positive. Because again, every strength is a weakness if it's in the wrong place. And every weakness is a strength if it's in the right context. So not how do we ignore what people are saying, but how do we just shift the context? How do we provide the context for our prospects or our clients or our networks so they understand, yes, you're right. They do all look the same. And yes, I can understand in a different context. Let's say that you're building out a design portfolio, or you're trying to win an award for being unique or being different, or if your main goal was to stand out from everyone in the industry, regardless of if it converts or not, if it creates leads or not, if you can sell or not. Like, if all you wanted to do was be different, then yeah, I mean, that's true. Our stuff all looks the same. Almost looks a little templated, doesn't it? That's not good. But if your goal is to generate more leads, your goal is to convert more traffic into clients, if your goal is to create a really effective marketing asset, then guess what? We have figured out through trial and error the best way to approach this. This is the best way to do it. Do we want to do it the best way or not? And so I want to get into some tactics for how to approach objection handling. But in my opinion, the thing that has served me better than anything else is to really listen. And before I respond, I have to ask myself, what is the real problem? This doesn't only serve you in sales or handling objections. This actually serves you in, I run an agency, a branding agency. And when we get feedback from clients, often the feedback isn't really the real feedback. So this helps you with client experience. This helps you with onboarding. This can help you with recruitment. This can help you with employee training and employee engagement. It's always the same, no matter what. If you're ever eliciting feedback, and all an objection is in the sales process is feedback. It's the prospect's opportunity to give you their feedback, and it reveals what their challenge is, what their issue is, what they understand, if they understand things, if you need to educate more or what have you. And so whatever it is they're giving you, that is your opportunity to be able to respond. If you try to respond to the original objection right away, like what I did with Max, my friend, and I just responded right away without thinking of it, that might work, hit and miss. But here's what you really need to do. What is the real problem? You need to understand the ask. Let me give you another example here. We used to produce a ton of videos. We were a video-centric agency for like 15 years. And so we have produced a lot of content for people. And sometimes we'd get stuff back where people would be like, the video's too long. Now, if you got feedback like the video is too long, or let's say you make something, you design something, it's too big, the wrong color, I don't like it, whatever it is, our feedback was always like, oh, the video's too long. What the client was saying was not in fact that the video's too long. They were saying that it felt slow, or you lost me, or I stopped paying attention, or there was a lull, or I got bored. You lost retention at some point along the way. It's not in fact that the video is too long, because unless if they're creating a 6-second, a 15-second, a 30-second, a 60-second ad, unless we're creating something where it has to be fit within a certain window of time, it's not that the video's too long. It's that there's something within the content that, or the structure or the music or the pace or the tone or the graphics. There's something in there where we're just kind of losing people. And so I used to have to stress this with my team all the time, because if a client says the video is too long and we respond with, okay, let's make it shorter, we're not answering the right question. If the video is too long and we respond with, well, tell me about that. What parts feel long? Why does it feel long? Where does it lose you? Because in fact, it's not about the length, it's about the pace and the retention. Now we can have a much more structured conversation. Now we can actually get to the root cause of what the issue is. And so when your prospect is sitting across from you and they give you that objection, again, I want to be able to turn any negative into a positive. I want to ensure that there's logic behind it. I want to make sure that it's not bullshit. But I can't do that until I really understand the real problem or understand the ask. Now, how do we approach this? If you're the type of person who really loves to follow a checklist or a structured strategy to get through this, I'm going to share with you the 6 steps that you can take to be able to actually help move really challenging objections through this process. But I believe that simply not being afraid to say no and looking to turn that negative into a positive is the way through most objections. There are some roadblocks where that just simply won't work. And that's where this framework will help a lot more. So first of all, you need to listen really, really carefully. Before we can address any type of objection, we need to really understand it. And again, and that's why I said we got to start off with understanding what the real problem is. You got to actively listen. You can't interrupt. You have to let the prospect finish. And you have to show empathy and understanding before getting defensive in any way. Second, we have to really clarify the objection. And this still comes down to what is the real problem, trying to get to that. But we have to clarify the objection. Sometimes they're not clear. Sometimes they're not as clear as they sound, or really they're masking other things like I mentioned. So this is now the time to start to ask open-ended questions. Why do you believe that is? Can you elaborate on that? What makes you feel that way? Have you experienced that in the past? Is this a concern internally? Is this coming from your experience or from other stakeholders? Just trying to understand where the challenge is coming from, why the challenge exists, and who might be affected by it, so that way you can start to better guide and understand, and even take this into account as you start to formulate your plan, your pitch, whatever it might be. Third, you have to acknowledge the concern. We can't brush it aside. We can't ignore it. It is a real concern for a reason. And so we need to be able to demonstrate the empathy, and we have to be able to show our prospects that we're taking their concerns seriously, that these are real concerns for them, even if we have experienced this a million times, even if we know it's not a big deal, even if we know that there's a way around it. They're bringing it up because it's a real concern for them. So we have to acknowledge that concern. This is when you want to use affirming language. So I understand where you're coming from. That is a valid concern. Oh, geez, I can see why in this situation. Yeah, that would be really tough. Okay, let's start to work on that and figure out how we're going to be able to work around that, how we can take this into account. Or if this objection is constantly coming up time and time again and you have no answer for it, this is a great opportunity to be able to shift your product, shift your value offer, create a different approach, create a different product, create a different payment structure, whatever it is, like actually engineer your way out of this problem. So every time you hit this roadblock, you're like, I already got an answer for it. We have this smaller tier. We have this secondary service. We have this custom service. We have this upgrade. We have this way around it. Yes, you are totally unique. Yes, your challenge is totally valid. And that's why we've taken these steps to be able to address them in some other way. Next, step 4, you have to be able to respond appropriately. I just kind of gave a few responses like, hey, okay, we keep running into this. Maybe we got to create something else. Now, this is where we want to address the root objection. Not what they brought forward, but the real problem, and then start to provide information or reassurance that there's ways around it. So some people like feel, felt, found. I heard that 15 years ago. I understand how you feel. Others felt the same way, but they found after using our product was blah, blah, blah. Anyone in sales knows feel, felt, found, and they're going to start to feel like they're being manipulated. I don't like using it. You can use the same approach. I just don't use those words. This is a great time to provide third-party social proof, evidence, case studies, more storytelling techniques, or to continue to ask more probing questions, to continue to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, turn that objection into a key conversation point, and then be able to start to work through that. And even just spend 5 or 10 minutes there, spend 20 minutes there. It's okay. Set up a second meeting to handle that objection. I mean, if it's a real objection and you're not going to be able to move forward without overcoming it, then let's park there for a bit and let's work through that. When you have responded appropriately, the next step is to confirm, has this objection been handled? Has this been set aside? Are you assured? Are you reassured? Are you comfortable? Because you might provide third-party credibility and they might think it's bullshit. You might do feel, felt, found, and it just simply may not be enough, because that's great. That's great for them, but I'm unique. I'm different. I need something else. You might ask probing questions and you might just end up running in circles. You may end up finding that just everything leads in circles. So at a certain point, you have to either handle the objection or set it aside. And you need to confirm that they're comfortable moving forward because you've handled the objection or you've set it aside. And then now's the time to redirect back to advancing the sales conversation. Once the objection's handled, you must continue to move the conversation forward. Transition back to focusing on benefits, focusing on storytelling, focusing on scope, or right-sizing the project or the product or the service or whatever it might be. Thank you so much for that question. I'm so glad you brought that up. Now I better understand exactly how we need to be able to frame this going forward, or now I better understand some of the concerns that you have, and now I can address that in my pitch, my proposal, and my pricing, and whatever it might be. You want to reassure them because you want them to bring you all of their objections. You don't want them to hide them. You want them to just open up and say, listen, here are the 8 things I'm worried about. How can we address these? And you go, perfect, great, let's figure out how to address these. Let's work together. Let's knock these things out. Because ideally, they're talking to you because they're looking for a win, and you're talking to them because you're looking for a win. So why not work together to figure out how to make this win-win, right? It seems reasonable to me. Okay, as we wrap up this episode, let's get into the 3-point roundup. Number 1, don't be afraid of objections. They are the greatest thing in the world because that is the prospect sharing with you the concerns they have. And they're being open, they're having a dialogue, and now you have the opportunity to be able to start to address some of these problems. Number 2, remember that every weakness is a strength in the right context. And it's your job to be able to provide that context, to take that weakness and show them why this is in fact part of the process, why it's engineered into the service or into the product, or it's something that they just don't have to live with. That if they looked at it the right way, if they used it the right way, if they implemented the right way, this in fact is an amazing benefit. And number 3, you are going to get objections on pricing or your product and service, or that you don't have enough trust or credibility built up, or someone is going to want to stall, or they are going to push off this decision to someone else. It's going to happen. And if you know it's going to happen, and if you find some are happening time and time and time again, then why not take the time to figure out how we want to respond to those things? Our hands aren't tied. We can figure out amazing ways to get around this, but we just have to look for the repetition, try new things, and see what works. I want to thank you for listening to this episode. Now, here's one thing. If you've made it this far into the show, you really should subscribe. Why would you do that? Well, every single week I share practical strategies and tips just like these to supercharge your business growth and to boost sales. With that said, I'm Mark Drager, challenging you to get out there, face those tough questions, those tough objections, turn them around, and go close some business.